The Providence Journal invited 8 public officials to discuss race in Rhode Island, our series about the state's changing population, the gaps that have developed among the races, and the consequences for all of us. Their comments will help shape public policy and set the climate for how we treat each other. Well, thank you very much for participating. So let me just start with the first question. Hey, do you want to keep going? Number 4.
Data from the Rhode Island Department of Education shows that public schools here are sharply segregated by race. And we want to know, does that matter to you? If so, what should be done about it? How do we change that?
I think that the segregation, one of the things that Providence does right is a lottery for all children for charter schools. And many of the cities and towns don't do that. It's simply whoever goes and signs up. So I think that, once again, I want to be careful because I believe Providence is the one community that all students have the opportunity to participate in lottery. I think overall making our public schools better is our commitment and our obligation, and we can do that with newer school facilities. I just mentioned Newport. Lifting this school moratorium was not just simply lifting a moratorium. What also was done is that there is going to be an assessment of where the condition of our schoolhouses are around the state. So it's not just the politically vocal neighborhood whose school gets fixed up, repaired, and redone. Rather, there's an assessment according to need to determine which schools, physical structures, need to be repaired, torn down, rebuilt, wired for technology. Because the infrastructure is a huge factor in attracting a diverse population to attend a school. If you have a beautiful school, we've seen it right in Newport, we have beautiful Pell School in the North End, our population goes up because people see a beautiful physical facility. And I really believe the step we took last year, requiring an inventory to assess what the needs are of the schoolhouses around the state, is at least a first step in reaching that direction. I also think advanced placement courses, advanced placement and opportunities for our students is very important. We have done some work in the minority community around expanding advanced placement opportunities. I think we need to do that for all of our school children as well.
How do you do that? With funding in the budget?
Funding.
And do you have a specific amount you would put toward it?
Once again, I believe we're going to be looking at the school formula, and it's just an issue that oftentimes falls to the wayside because of the federal requirements. Too often we're working towards a minimum in our public schools rather than the best.
Before I get to your question, I've heard school funding formula revisited several times here today. I'm still not sure exactly what you're revisiting. Why
The
are you
governor
revisiting?
has-
What's the goal here? What's the problem? Why are you revisiting it?
With the development of the charter schools, what has happened is we have a funding formula that isn't adequately funding traditional education. We want to maintain, nobody's saying charter schools aren't good, but what we have found is that there's a disproportionate pull from traditional public schools because we're doing it on a per student basis, and that means, for example, school transportation, special needs, and those categories are being taken from the traditional public school. For example, in the city of Providence, that's millions of dollars. I think it will require new money to education.
New money?
New additional money. Let me be clear. One of the reasons we've urged the governor, the folks that have been involved with this in my chamber, to look at this in the fall is it would probably require as much as $10 million new dollars to address the disparities that have been created in the current formula. It was bound to happen. The formula's been in place for a number of years now, and the only way you can see it doesn't mean anything bad. What it means is over time we see where the weaknesses are, and I think we do need additional funding.
$10 million statewide?
I think that's at a minimum what we would need.
At a minimum. What does the governor say to that?
I think she's going to put together a work group to take a look at it, and I've talked to the mayor. I know he has said that he really feels he needs additional money for funding education in the city. So I think we all have to work together and make education funding a priority.
Okay, Ray?
Sure. we were looking here at the 17-page school to prison pipeline in black and white, the ACLU report, and it says blacks are disproportionately suspended from school, stopped and searched by police, and incarcerated in Rhode Island. What legislation do you support to address those findings?
Once again, I don't know if all solutions are legislative per se, but what I will say, on the school suspensions throughout the country as well as in Rhode Island, we've seen that disabled students, children with English as a second language, as well as all children of color are disproportionately suspended from school. Different states and different cities around the country have taken a different approach to this. Certainly, there is no doubt in my mind that time out of school leads to a less likelihood to succeed in school, and that suspension should be the very last alternative, particularly out of school suspensions. Different states have looked at, some cities have looked at methods such as what you suspend, what you impose an out-of-school suspension for. I would need to take a closer look at the reasons for the suspension and ensure that principals have discretion when it comes with regard to suspension, that in-house suspensions are encouraged, and the grounds for suspension are clearly demarcated, particularly out-of-school suspensions. Once again, I want to be clear about that. And this is an issue that, I have to be honest, my greatest familiarity comes from looking at the disabled community as well, where it is also a very significant issue for our students with disabilities.
And so with an in-school suspension, is learning still going on then? Are they put in one room for a study hall, or
it can work differently in different schools, but in general, the concept is that they're still in school.
Still in school.
So both Yale for New Haven and Harvard for Cambridge and Boston is going into the community, spending money, doing real community help. Our community health, it's not even ours, Brown University's community health does 2%. And I'm not talking dollar-wise, I'm talking about, because their capacity is less. So I keep looking at, we can't get a perfect storm. The state, and I'm being critical, the state's not doing what it could do, and then our major health school is doing almost nothing, spends not a single dime on community. In fact, what it does is take federal money and does studies. I hate to be so critical, because I'm all around.
And I will say Providence may be a little different than some communities, but I do want to say our CAP agencies, our health centers are doing a pretty good job of reaching out and providing quality health care. And some, like in Woonsocket and in Newport, they are reaching out. In terms of the hospital lifespan in particular, or Care New England, I don't know what initiatives they have, or Brown for that matter. I do know that as part of the budget this year, we included some fundings for what we call the diversion program to catch people at the emergency room and divert them to, before they get admitted or just simply treated, to other types of care, whether it be for mental health center. The Providence Center is going to play a critical role in the diversion program, and Senator Miller's been a leader. But it's taken us almost 3 years to get that program up and running. We've been working with the hospitals, with the mental health centers, just to get that program up and running, which will, once again, save us money in the long run if we can divert people from the emergency room.
One of the things that we notice as we work on a series like this is that not everybody's talking about the issues out loud and publicly. Just the other night at RIPEC, you spoke for some minutes, and your only mention of racial disparities was hinting at them when you talked about the full-day kindergarten and the need for that to close the achievement gaps. Why not talk more about the racial divides in the state?
It's a fair question, probably because they make people uncomfortable. You know, that it's always engenders a discussion, and it's very fine line between promoting divisiveness and promoting an awareness. And as elected officials, we often choose our words very carefully as you say, and maybe hint rather than say directly. And that's perhaps the most honest answer I can give you. It's just not easy all the time to talk about these kind of issues in terms of race.
Well, that's our time. Thank you very much. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
We'll do it again, okay?
Thanks. Oh, no, I'd like that.